Hi, welcome to Oma's Kitchen.
Oregano.
After years and years of digging around in the spice cabinet for the proper spices for whatever I'm making, I decided to try this to see if it would speed things up for me, and I'm sorry I didn't do it sooner. I bought this spice rack on Amazon, I forget the brand. It came with a sticker for every single kind of spice I could possibly think of, including Old Bay seasoning. No self-respecting person from Baltimore would have a spice rack without Old Bay seasoning in it. I actually refill this jar from the jar that I keep in my spice cabinet. I wanted to show, I keep a big thing of salt, baking soda and baking powder, cocoa, vanilla. I also have a whole bunch of other extracts and stuff in my cabinet. I actually don't have to dig for these because whenever I run out of something, then I can find what I'm looking for and refill my alphabetical order spice rack. So let's talk about spices. Let's go through some of my spices and I'll talk about how I use them. The first one, basil. I use dried basil in homemade Italian sauces, including a spinach cream sauce that goes really well there. I can also use it to help me spice a chicken with some thyme leaves and crushed sage. Bay leaf. This goes in a lot of my stews. It makes a really nice flavor for a stew. This is my own Cajun seasoning that I make this mixture homemade. And if you can see that there. I actually got this recipe online and I've changed it a little bit to kind of match our tastes a little better. And I will give credit to the original recipe that I found online. So this is actually a mixture of a bunch of peppers and some oregano and a bunch of other stuff. Caraway seeds. I use this in sauerkraut, and I can also use it to make rye bread. Cardamom seeds I did not discover until recently. I would say 5-6 years ago. I actually have a whole cake recipe built around cardamom, ground cardamom seeds. So I keep some of those on hand. Both regular chili powder and chipotle I use in all of my Tex-Mex, Mexican, Spanish, spicy foods. The chipotle is really spicy, but it also gives kind of a smoky, spicy flavor, and I really, really like that in things like fajitas. Cinnamon, of course, in baking, and eggnog. Cinnamon sticks I don't use very often, but sometimes in the winter I will make an apple cider with cloved oranges and I'll float some cinnamon sticks in there. That comes out really nice. So I like to have a couple of those on hand as well. Down here we've got cloves, same reason. When we're talking about apple cider, what you do is you cut little slits in a whole orange, and then you cut an orange into slices. And the whole orange, you stick the cloves into all the little slits all the way around the whole orange. And you float both of those in some apple cider. It comes out really nice, warm. So that's that. Coriander, I use in both the spicy Mexican and Tex-Mex food. I also use it in Middle Eastern food. Coriander and cumin. Curry powder. I absolutely love yellow curry. I make Middle Eastern chicken curry. Dillweed I use a lot of this actually when I make tuna salad or when I make blackened salmon. I will make a dilled sour cream sauce to go on the side. I use this a lot with tarragon. In tuna salad, chicken salad, Tarragon is also really good with tomatoes. It's like tarragon and tomatoes were meant to be together. Fresh tomatoes with some tarragon sprinkled on top is wonderful. Fennel seed. I don't use this much. This is I've used this in a couple of dessert recipes, which is why I still have a bunch of it. Garlic powder. I use this a lot instead of fresh cloves of garlic because I like more control over how much garlic goes in my food, because garlic and I do not really get along very well. I don't mind a little of it. I really mind a lot of it, and it tends to upset my stomach if there's too much. So you'll discover a lot of my cooking doesn't have a lot of garlic. You can always add more. You can always double the amount of garlic powder that I use, or you could always substitute with cloves of garlic if you want. Lavender. This lavender was sent to me by a friend in Germany. She grew it in her garden and then dried it and sent it to me. It is edible. It is wonderful in lemon shortbread cookies, but you have to be careful not to add too much or it starts to taste a little bit like perfume. Brown mustard seeds and yellow mustard seeds. Use these when I make samosas. Mustard seeds go really well with the curry. So I'll do that. Down here, whole nutmeg. I keep this, a grater. So I just pull out a nutmeg when I'm going to use it. And then I run this across to add nutmeg to anything I want. Now, I can tell you there is a huge difference in flavor between freshly ground nutmeg and the already ground version. This is why I keep the actual nutmegs in my kitchen. And I actually just grate it right before it goes into the recipe. Some of my baking recipes, you'll see me doing that. Old Bay seasoning. This I use with crab cakes, I use with steamed shrimp, of course, because I'm from Baltimore. And onion powder goes in almost everything I cook. It's nice as a little background flavor. It doesn't tend to take over. It provides a deepness to any sauces or anything that I'm baking, like chicken. So I use this a lot. My oregano is the same way. I love oregano. You might have noticed that in my intro song. Oregano is one of my favorite spices, and I will use that fairly often. I have smoked paprika here. This is used in both my Cajun seasoning, and I use it along with chili powder and chipotle in a lot of my spicier food. This paprika is wonderful for a smoked flavor. And I actually, when I make a homemade cheese sauce for mac and cheese, I actually add some of this. It makes the cheese sauce, it just brings it up to a much nicer level. It doesn't fall as flat that way. Parsley, I add this to most of my Italian cooking. I add it to tuna salad, chicken salad. Sometimes I add it, I use fresh parsley for kedgeree, which we'll do a version on kedgeree. And I use fresh parsley sometimes for parsley potatoes. But this is nice if I'm making potatoes and I just want to make like a herbed potatoes, then I'll crush some sage and use thyme and some parsley and add that in. Pumpkin pie spice is a mixture of nutmeg, cloves, cinnamon. I use this obviously for pumpkin pie. I also make this really great pumpkin bread. Amish pumpkin bread, although I don't know what makes it Amish. We will do an episode on that this year during the holidays. We'll do that. And I use pumpkin pie spice for that. I usually use this and then I add extra cinnamon. And maybe a little scrape of nutmeg in there too. The red pepper flakes, I add these to my husband's buffalo wings because his buffalo wings cannot be spicy enough. And I also add the red pepper flakes to my Cajun seasoning, and you'll see some of those mixed in there as well. All right, we're down to rosemary. Rosemary is great with chicken or any other kind of poultry. You'll see that it's like dried sticks, so I usually use a grinder for that. I have a little coffee grinder that I use for spices. I'll grind that up with some sage and some thyme, and it becomes a great poultry seasoning. Saffron, the most expensive spice in the world, and it's because it's the stamens of a crocus plant that has to be harvested by hand and then dried. I keep a little bit on hand to make saffron rice. We'll do an episode on that as well. It doesn't take much saffron to provide both flavor and color to your whole pot of rice. I would say 1/2 to 1 teaspoon for each pot of rice. So I have in this jar probably at least 4 or 5 big pots of saffron rice available to me. Sage, one of my favorite things in the world. My friend in Germany also sent me this sage from her garden, and she dried it, grew it and dried it and mailed it to me, which was such a sweet gift. I have this labeled as seasoned salt. This was given to me, it's a saffron salt, but it includes vanilla. I keep thinking, I'm gonna find something I wanna try this with. This is labeled Himalayan salt, which is what it originally was. This is actually already ground black pepper. And I know that's what it is when I get it out. I also have a pepper grinder, and it depends on what I'm using the pepper for. If I'm using the pepper in just like scrambled eggs or something, I'll use this one. If I'm using pepper on a salad or on top of something, I'll grind some fresh pepper on. This is just my salt mixer, and I refill this all the time. Tarragon, like I said, tarragon, its best friend is fresh tomatoes. Slice up some tomatoes, sprinkle some salt and fresh ground pepper on top, and then sprinkle some tarragon on top. And you will find it is the nicest flavor. Thyme. Thyme goes with rosemary and sage for any savory dish. If I'm making chicken and dumplings, I will use rosemary, thyme, and sage in there, along with onion powder and salt. So this is one of the staples of my kitchen as well. Vanilla bean. This is actually not vanilla bean. This is cocoa. And I needed to sprinkle cocoa on top of homemade tiramisu at Christmas. So I put cocoa in here because I had no vanilla beans in there. I'll put this back in the cocoa container and fill it with vanilla beans now that I've bought new ones. This is an old coffee grinder. See, it gets plugged in. I've had this for probably 15 years, and I actually use it to grind spices. So it's never used for coffee, just for spices. And it's nice because you can grind them and then flip it over upside down, tap the top, and you get your ground spices down in here. I use it to grind cardamom seeds. I use it to grind other spices, like if I'm mixing together thyme, rosemary, and sage, I'll run it through this grinder to make a nice poultry seasoning. When I'm making pound cakes or scones, the nicest thing I can do for them, besides using vanilla extract, which I also use in them, I will cut open 1/2 or 1 whole vanilla bean, slice it right down the middle, open it up, scrape out the seeds, the back of a knife, and add that to your mixture. I also use vanilla bean in pie crust, and it makes such a nice flavor for the pie crust. So I usually try to keep vanilla bean around, keep it really tight so it doesn't dry out. So I wanted to explain this. You'll see it in the background in some of my videos. I wish I had done this for myself years ago, instead of spending a lot of time looking around in the spice cabinet for what I need. I wanted to do this episode on spices so that you could see what spices I use with what types of food. You don't have to have all these spices in your kitchen. Spices are expensive. You know, it's easier to buy 1 jar of spice than to buy, 30 jars of spices. So if you wanted to get a really nice set of spices going, then I recommend you get 1 as we use them in our recipes. Thank you for joining me in Oma's Kitchen. If you enjoyed the video, please don't forget to like and subscribe. I'll upload more tasty videos soon, and a special shout out to Moon Pie and Lil Bit. Till next time.
Oregano.